I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with an amazing author by the name of Terry Stavridis. He has written a wonderful book. It is called Tales from the Last Days of Anatolia. He paints a vivid tableau of the waning moments of the Ottoman Empire through fictional short stories set in Asia Minor, today's modern Turkey. Though the characters are conjured from the realms of imagination, they navigate the complexities of very real events from that tumultuous era. We are delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and purchasing this wonderful book, Tales from the Last Days of Anatolia. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. Also, thank Prime 7 Media for making it possible to be with you.
Our pleasure. Great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and why you thought it was important for readers to understand the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Well, I actually come originally from an academic background. Mm-hmm. I've taught at university and community college levels, both in Australia and the United States. Mm-hmm. Being a historian, I found over recent times that reading publics are not really interested in reading academic histories. It's only those that have a special interest of the general public, and of course academics who have an interest in reading history. So I decided to move away from academic history. Not that I still don't write it. Mm-hmm. So I decided to dabble my hand in historical fiction. So I decided to put this vast knowledge of over 30 years of research and writing in coming up with fictional characters, and then trying to posit them in events that were taking place over 100 years ago and after the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1922. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that motivated me to do that.
Well, I think it was a great idea because it does make the work very approachable to the average reader. You don't have to be a scholar to read this. You'll be informed and you'll be entertained by the stories contained within this collection. Terry, let me ask you, which story in the collection resonated with you the most and why?
All the stories do, but the three ones where I've concentrated most of my work on is a lady from Pontus. Pontus is a geographic region along the shores of the Black Sea. And this was predominantly a Greek-speaking area. Of course, Turks, Armenians also lived in that area as well. Now this lady, Molina was married, had two children. She and her husband ran a small business, but they weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. Mm-hmm. The husband decides in 1920, during the time of the Greco-Turkish War, I want to go and fight. She tried to dissuade him not to go, right. But he went, and he lost his life. Mm. Like so many soldiers lose their lives in conflict. Now, in September 1922, the Greek army was defeated and left Asia Minor forever. Now, the Greeks that remained behind were, in the end, were told to leave Turkey or either convert to Islam or die. Mm. So Molina was transported across the desert, mountains, and all that, and she ended up in the southeastern coast of Turkey. And so as part of the exchange of populations, she was then taken aboard an American ship, made its way gradually across. They stopped in some of the Greek islands to load up with food and take a bit of a rest of being on board the ship. But finally, she ends up in Piraeus, and then she ends up in her home was a tent near the Acropolis, and there are pictures that you see 1922, 23 of Greeks from Asia Minor living in tents at the bottom of the Parthenon. Anyway, that was her home for a couple of years. She managed to find an apartment. She became a seamstress, and she made her money. Then she set up her own business. Her two children, Ioannis and Maria, were her life. When she was leaving on the road to be deported from Turkey, the only thing that kept her going was her prayers and faith in the Virgin Mary and the will to survive. Because I suppose if I was trying to be Molina, and I've got two children, my focus isn't so much on me. I need to survive to ensure that these kids are not orphans. And that's one of the tragedies of that period too. There were a lot of orphan children who who lost their parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and so on. And anyway, well, she lived through the tumultuous period of the 1930s in Greece, when the king came back. 1935, King George was reinstalled on the throne. Then a year later, you have a dictatorship under Metaxas, Greece in the Second World War. Her son goes and fights World War II. He becomes a lawyer. He goes on a trip to the United States in the 1950s. He loves it. He comes back, and then he ends up living in Chicago. He becomes a lawyer. Yeah, the American dream as well, because I'm fixated on the American dream as well.
Yeah.
And she writes finally in her diary, I hope that one of my kids will actually take up the story and continue the diary entries, which I've kept.
Yeah.
So that's the story of Molina. There's a lot more to it, but I'm trying to synthesize the sort of key elements of her life. Now, the next guy is Harry Malany. I could have put in the real, not Harry Malany, George Horton, who actually was the American consul general in Greece at particular times. And also he was the consul general from 1919 until 1922, when the catastrophe happened in September of that year. So I came up with the fictional name Harry Malany. I changed his story around a little bit to as you know, Hollywood does change events, to make it a bit more interesting and all that. Yeah. So I gave the name of Harry Malany. Harry Malany goes to the University of Chicago. He graduates in the classics. And of course, he must have learned Greek and Latin as well. And so the first job that he gets a job as a journalist. And he was interested in socioeconomics events of the period in Chicago. He covered mainly the poor people and all that. And he also became fascinated with the very small Greek community that was in Chicago, because in those days there were a lot of Greeks who came over in the 1880s, 1890s. They had their push carts and they sold their fruit and veggies and whatever to actually make a living. Mm-hmm. So he became very interested in that, and he befriended one of these Greeks who spoke broken English, and he was able to communicate with him in Greek as well. Finally, he gets a letter from the president of the day, and telling him, you are going to be our consul general in Athens. Mm. Because basically what the president would have been thinking was, we want a greater presence in Greece. And so Harry ended up being a journalist, a diplomat. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, he left the diplomatic corps for a short time. Then he became an author, went on a tour, promoting his books and giving talks and so on. He came back again into the diplomatic corps, and he was stationed in Constantinople, which he really wasn't. He was really in Salonika. But he also gives a description of the social and economic life in Salonika and so on. And of course, he also describes what was going on in Asia Minor, in Greece, and so he had a very good knowledge of that. And when he was in Smyrna as well, he also learned French and Turkish. So he was very multilingual because at that time, Logan, if you look at it from the American diplomats, very few of them actually spoke another language other than English. So George Horton was that kind of guy. Now, I remember somewhere in his biography, he actually used to go up and spend some time with King George I of Greece. They'd sit down and light up their cigars, have their whiskey or brandy, whatever they had, and they discuss the politics, of their time. Now, he also married a Greek lady. So I suppose that's why he had this love of Greece as well. Mm-hmm. And when Smyrna finally collapsed and the Greek army was ejected in September 1922, he was very fortunate that his wife and daughter were in the US on vacation, as such. After that, he leaves the diplomatic corps and then he just pursues as a private citizen after that. And that's what George Horton actually did. After that, the real George Horton actually ended up being US ambassador to Hungary in Budapest. And then after 1924, George Horton was disappeared as such. But he was one of the great American diplomats of his era. So Harry Mulvaney is really George Horton, the real George Horton. But I came up with a fictional character. I don't know. Sometimes I felt that maybe if I came up with George Horton and said things like that, you never know. There may be people that may take offence, and I don't know, maybe sue you. So that's why I changed the dynamics there around a bit.
Exactly, and it makes it historical fiction. It gives you a little freedom in your storytelling to bring it to life with details you may or may not know about that may be inconsequential, but actually paint a picture of those days. And you've done a wonderful job. Folks at home, you can see that Terry is a master storyteller from some of the tales he has told us today. They're contained within a book called Tales from the Last Days of Anatolia. He paints a vivid picture of the waning moments of the Ottoman Empire through a series of short stories. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan, for the opportunity to come onto your show.
The pleasure is all mine. And of course, these books are available on Amazon and other booksellers as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.